This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
My Uncle Graham, when he was a young man, played the trumpet.
Let me tell you about the Horde, the group of half-brother, half-orc barbarians.
And then by the time you had to fight the Archdemon at the end and he's a dragon, the only way to beat him is to fire ballistas at him, but you can't repair any of the ballistas because you don't have a rogue in your party.
Maybe we should stop using the word group. Maybe we should change it to team. I'm joining a D&D team.
Can we agree that magic items are trash?
I think by the end I did agree with Shawn. I'm a little mad about it.
All that and more right now on ESPN.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 pre-recorded tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms. That's right, I feel kind of weirdly abandoned not having a chat here this week, but that's all right, because I am joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, and this week, stepping in for James Hake, Brooks Donoghue. Brooks, welcome to the Lorecast.
Hello, thrilled to be here. That always feels so weird to say. I feel like I'm on a Tonight Show or something. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No. You are very welcome. We can make this as Tonight Showy as you like.
I wore a tie, okay, Ben?
This is a top-notch, sophisticated RPG show.
You've set a standard we have failed to meet.
I'm going to get the cribbage board and we'll class this place up.
See, I'm at home. This is fine.
Yep.
I really feel like we're reaching out to the Mastering Dungeons crowd, the more sophisticated crowd, in this week's episode. But I do have to ask you, Brooks, as I ask a question at the start of every episode, what do you think your creative / professional strength is? What do you love doing in the realm of your profession? I
love interpreting. I love finding just the seed of an idea and germinating that into a full blooming flower. I love, I'll have a dream, or I'll have someone will make a joke, or I'll read some short story or something like that and be like, but what else is going on in that world? And that has inspired the whole thing. The first thing I ever wrote was kind of a riff on my like weird segmented memory of The City of Lost Children, that French movie with Ron Perlman in it, years ago, 90s or something like that. That was that. I think it was by the same guy who did Amelie, but it was this idea I had that just blossomed into this whole thing. So I think that my biggest strength is finding the story in very little and trying to kind of fill in those gaps as best I can. But yeah, I think I wouldn't quite call myself an idea guy, but I like finding just a little spark of inspiration kind of blowing on the ember until that's a little fire. That's all.
I really like yapping. I love meeting people. I love talking to people. I love bouncing ideas back and forth. I'm very comfortable in a social context, with whether it be with strangers or good friends, and so I really like that kind of aspect of it. I like sort of getting to meet a bunch of other people who work in the same sphere and then chatting until magic happens, if that makes sense. Like I feel like it's often in conversation where I have my best ideas, or those ideas get refined. But yeah, I don't know, that social connection is kind of my favorite bit.
Do you feel like you get to collaborate a lot? Especially because you don't, as far as I'm aware, kind of work
not as much as I would like to.
Other people
I would love to. I would love to do more of that stuff, and I hope to do more of that stuff, because it can be very lonely. It can be very lonely.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel like I love bouncing ideas. Kind of, as a theatre kid, when you'd get in a room. I had a drama teacher when I was at university, college. For those of other persuasions.
It's fine. I speak criminal. Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. Awesome. We're on the same page then. Who was very like, you go into university and you start making drama plays, and you all go to the cafe and sit down and start writing your scripts, and who's my character going to be, da-da-da-da-da. And he was like, let's get rid of all of that. Let's just stand in a room and, what about this? Yeah, what about this? For those listening, I'm just showing my phone to camera, and that's all he'd do is just pick up random objects. He'd stab a board with a pair of scissors and then be like, yeah, scissors. And
this does kind of feel like it's really taken me back to theatre school, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That idea of just like being in a physical space and just like creating things through doing, I suppose, crafting in some way. It's a type of creation that I very much enjoy.
My strength is my inability to understand things and not be very bright, because what that has given me the opportunity to do is break things down to a point where I can understand them. And if I can get them to that point, I can generally show other people how to do that, and it makes it easier for them. And so I found that my niche was technical writing, which is to break things down to its very essence and explain it in the smallest and clearest terms possible, as deeply as possible, so no one can mess this up. And I've written that for 50 years now, and it's served me very well.
If Shawn Moen is being representation for not very bright, it doesn't look good for the rest of us.
This has been years and years and years of accumulating very small bits of knowledge that I fall back on over and over and over again.
That makes me wonder, like, Shawn, it seems like your process is a little more kind of, you do kind of all that interpreting yourself, right? Where you make it available and accessible for other people. And then Dael, you said that yours process is really collaborative, and the same thing with Ben. Do you guys think that, I hate to use the word better here, but like, do your better ideas come as a result of collaboration or as a result of like rolling it around in your mind for a while?
I'll quickly clarify, because I'll jump in and say that while I love collaboration, I also, as Shawn is probably learning as we work on Grim Hollow, I'm very picky. And often I'll ask questions I don't actually want an answer to, because I'll be like, oh, what do you think of this? And then when I start to get answers, I'm like, nah, I don't like any of that. Or I'll get like an answer that I'm like, I don't love that idea, but you've actually given me a different idea through that, that I think, let's go in this direction and explore this as well. And that might sound, I don't know, sort of strangely arrogant. I'm always very conscious of trying not to seem arrogant or dismissive of other people, because I enjoy collaboration, and I enjoy, I watched a YouTube video years ago about like, good ideas are when one person has one half and another person has another half, and you bring them together and that sprouts a new thing. And I very much believe in that. But I think my creative strength and where I get my best ideas from, to answer your question, what I consider my best ideas, whether they've been sparked by someone else or not, but he's kind of like what you were describing earlier, Brooks, about like blowing on an ember and letting it, kind of exploring an idea to its fullest and being like, oh, what if I could add this? And what if I added this? And what if I was inspired by this? And that could work in a different context. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and then like Dael, are you similar in that idea?
Yeah, I think so. Because, I think some great ideas have come from like true collaboration, like really like you have this great idea and I have this great idea and those great ideas are compatible. Let's put them together. But also I think there's just kind of a really, it's like rolling ideas around in my own head for a while, but I do that via conversation. Like I externalize it through talk, and I will, talk to my brother or my cousin or my friend or whoever, with any idea, and just that conversation back and forth will lead to some refinement of the idea in some form. And sometimes even if there's no one around, I will talk through out loud what my idea is, just because I think it's through that talk that I kind of find the heart of what I'm looking for. Is that what my YouTube channel is?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, if you consider chat another person or the comments another person, then yeah.
Are you confident, Dael, in terms of your own? Because I find that like I have an idea that I think is great, or I have even speaking about YouTube, I'll like design a thumbnail and I'll be like, oh, this is great, but I need a second opinion to feel like it's validated. And if the opinion I get back is not what I was hoping for, if there's some criticism in that opinion, I have to find that I have to decide whether to have the confidence to be like, no, you know what, this is actually great, I'm going to stick with it, or find the validity in the criticism and be like, okay, no, I do need to change direction because there's this problem here. But finding confidence and being assertive in terms of like, no, actually, I think this idea is strong enough on its own, or this thing that's being created is strong enough on its own, is something that I'm trying to learn to do balanced against not dismissing other people's thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
But the reason I ask is because what you've described in terms of like, I need other people to talk to, even if I've had a great idea in isolation, I feel that a lot as well, where I'm just like, I need somebody to also say that it's great. Otherwise, I'm not sure if it actually is.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's quite the same for me, just because I think it's such an instinctive early part of my process that I reach to talk to someone else about it, that I don't think I very rarely get to any kind of a finished version of something before I have talked to someone about it, if that makes sense. So it's not like I've done a thing and now I want validation. It's more like I have the burgeoning beginnings of an idea. Let me talk your ear off about it.
I mean, I know an author who literally has told me about how on a deadline they've like gone to their like they have a house on the coast and it's their retreat, and they go and they don't talk to anybody and they don't email anyone or text anyone or call anyone, but they pounded out like a 12,000 word adventure in a weekend. And on one hand, it's a blistering pace. And on the other hand, I just thought I couldn't ever do that and not get any feedback on an idea. I don't know, like, and I know that what I originally said was like, oh yeah, I like, cooking something up myself. But like, I think that there's, just like you said, there's like an intrinsic part of me that needs to hear from just any opinion from someone else. And I think if I really in my heart know it's a good idea, even if someone tells me it's a bad idea, I think that instinctive, reflexive doubling down of like, no, it's a great idea. That really is the one where I'm like, I got to latch onto that. Cause like, I know that I'm going to make it a good idea just by wanting it enough. You know what I mean?
What about you, Shawn? Because I'm curious, like, if you don't mind me saying, I found that your work process from the outside looking in is that you seem to sort of take a brief or take a, this is what we want to do. And you're like, okay. And then you kind of like go into the Shawn vault and you just hear the tinkering sounds coming from within. And then you emerge like a month later and you're like, here, I have forged this.
Yes. And I can do that with certain media because I have gone through all the steps of the process before, not just as the creator, but as the game master if it's an adventure, as the player if it's a mechanic. So I turn on the design brain and I design. Then I turn on the developer brain and I develop. And then I turn on the game master brain and say, wait a second, you idiot designer. I'm the game master now. And if my players had this object, this magic item, this feat, I would hate you. So now I go back to the designer and I say, oh, sorry, game master, my bad. Let me do this again. So it's still an iterative process. I'm just talking to myself, but it still then needs to go to people. It still then needs to go to other players and game masters and designers and developers and editors who have their own experiences and who have their own visions and can totally clear up anything that I've done wrong.
Now I'm just imagining the Shawn Merwin version of the Inside Out characters, and the game master is anger, just marching over to Happy and just being, or Joy, and just being like, what is this?
And that's why during a previous episode when we were talking about a 4-page game that we had read, I felt comfortable as a designer to say, here are some problems with it, because I know that I do that to myself. And I know that game designers should do that to themselves as they are designing. I hope it's never taken wrong, but it's why I feel I can do that, especially if asked, without overstepping or without coming off as cruel, because it's a necessity. It's a part of this thing that we do that you have to get familiar with and you have to be comfortable with at some point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I feel like that's why we work as a good team, is because I'm just the like, what if like we made a thing and it like did this and it was just like a thing.
This?
What about exactly. What about the scissors? What about we've sort of buried the lead a little bit here, Brooks, but for folks who aren't familiar with your work, although they're likely familiar without being aware of it, you're a game designer with a couple of credits across the tabletop RPG industry, including Wizards of the Coast, working on Keys from the Golden Vault, Mage Hand Press, working on Insomnia 5e, Hachette Paperworks. You worked with James Hake on the D&D Adventure magazine.
Yeah, I did.
Well, I was also going to say you've worked on this book, The Seeker's Guide to Enchanting Emporiums.
Wow.
This is just a color proof, so this is not the final thing.
There it isn't. Never mind.
Well, it's full. There's full, full pages in here of the whole book.
This is always such a weird feeling, seeing something that I tapped out in a Google Doc and then or in Microsoft Word on my laptop at like however the hell in the morning, and I'm like, and now it's a hardcover book, and
now
that's
it
just
is
such
a hardcover book
experience.
I feel the same because you and I are actually in the credits of this book. You and I are right next to each other because this is one of the first books that I've actually had writing in as well for Ghostfire Gaming.
Is it just because our names are alphabetically adjacent?
They are, yes.
Oh, great.
Ben and
Okay,
Brooks,
good.
right next to each other.
I was going to say, I'm no great shakes.
But your Emporium, I believe. Correct me. Which Emporium was the one that you worked on?
Oh my God, I did House of Favelli. That was such a passion project for me.
And I think I can tell because I know that your day job is in men's fashion. I believe
because I'm dressed for it because I'm cutting it to get here and be here on the podcast.
As soon as I flicked open House of Favelli and started reading it, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is Brooks. This feels like Brooks's Emporium." Tell us about it. Tell us about House of Favelli.
Oh my word! Well, so I work in my day job. I work for. I work as I wouldn't quite call myself a tailor or a stylist. I'm something kind of in between. I call myself a clothier, but basically I work in the wedding industry ish, and I cut suits. So I I design clothes for guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and whoever wants to come in and get something rad. And that's been my passion for 11 years. I have a tattoo for it on my wrist and everything like that. I kind of live and breathe it. The opportunity that you extended to me was one of those very rare intersections where high fashion and tabletop role-playing gaming collide. And I was just so fortunate enough for James and you to reach out and like just dump this in my lap. What are the possible chances of all the emporiums that could need help on short notice was this one. Stars continue to align. So the House of Favelli, in terms of emporiums, I always thought, I think it's fascinating that they said, oh, well, like if you ever read in the DMG, they say any magical item, just shapes to whoever's wearing it. If it's a magical breastplate or a helmet or whatever. And I'm like, that's okay, sure. But considering the variety of body plans that are present in role-playing gaming, where you have your orcs and your ogres and your spider people, I'm like, God, it must suck to find pants. Oh, we don't carry clothes for gnomes here, sir. You're going to go to Gnomingtons. It's a 25-minute walk away, or something like that. And so being somebody that's not really been included in clothing, I'm very small. I have a 34-inch chest. I'm a little dude. That's always kind of resonated for me. And so I wrote an emporium of not magical, but the greatest clothier anywhere who makes robes and trousers and capes and shirts and all manner of things for all manner of clients. And there were a lot of different influences on that, but the most was probably me working for and just the weird people who have come in and bought things from me and just their backstories and they what home do they go home to from the shop and what do they do in the, when I don't get to see them, where they can come in and drop 14 grand in a single sitting. I'm like, what is your life like? And so I wrote somebody who actually knew what their life was like. So Favelli, Madame Favelli, there is definitely some Edna Mode in her. There is a number of my prior bosses in her, but if you're asking what it is, it's like a tailor shop. They make magical garments. They make garments for all kinds and shapes of people. I made a reference to like they did making a fire giant's inseam or something ridiculous like that. Burn hazard. But my point being that it's something that I think nobody really considers. Is like, if you ever watch any D&D media or read any media, they're like, oh yeah, he's wearing this asymmetrical jerkin. And the first thing people will tell you is what their character is wearing. Or like the second thing besides what they look like, oh, he has this purple cape that turns into an ombre and it's kind of fuchsia around the bottom. And then it descends kind of into a mist. I'm like, where did you buy that? Where did you find that? Sure, you could have stolen it off a lich, but like, do liches just get their cape stolen all the time or what? And so I think that with all these fantastical outfits that you see in every piece of D&D literature, I'm like, who makes that? Where'd you get that? Which clearance rack was that off of, bro? Why does everything fit you perfectly? And of course, at the end of the day, of course, it's all tailors. So I thought that would be a really cool niche to fill.
It is, and I love Enchanting Emporiums. For folks who aren't aware, it was kickstarted last year. It is running a little bit behind, but shipping is planning to start for backers in January. So it is not too far away whatsoever. But this has got, I believe it's called the Hedgegrow, is Ginny D's Emporium, and it's all kind of like weapons and armor that have been grown from plants and things. And so there's like a shield that gives you photosynthesis or something. James wrote a Grim Hollow Emporium called the Ashen Grove, I believe, which has some great kind of cool hints at Grim Hollow lore in there as well. Professor Terence Myron von Kufen, who is not a monster hunter, despite many people mistaking him for one both in world and out of world, hilariously enough, was the one that I wrote. It's a super cool book. We've got this colorproof version in at the moment that I've been flicking through, but it will be available hopefully very soon. Oh, I also have, this was a little Kickstarter back, I think it was the first 24-hour reward. It's the Golden Goo Goo. We got a prototype of this in as well, a little dice holder. It's bigger than I thought it would be. I don't know why I thought it was only going to be the size of the dice, but that doesn't make sense because it's got to hold the dice. But it's adorable. I just wanted to put that out there as well. People listening, if you're listening to this on Spotify, Spotify also has video, so you can whip up your phone and take a quick look, but pull over first or dry your hands if you're washing the dishes.
You know your audience.
Yes, yeah, I know where they listen to the Eldritch Lorecast. I know the places. End of the
and
people.
It's always while driving or washing dishes.
Those are the only two times, people.
Yeah.
If you're not driving or washing dishes, you better turn this off right now.
You better hop in your car.
Exactly.
Your car.
There you go.
Exactly,
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or not like the Mastering Dungeons crowd who only listen beside a fireplace while drinking Chianti
smoking
or
a
something.
pipe and playing
Smoking
exactly.
jackets and everything like that. Bearskin rugs.
Our listeners do ask questions from time to time, and being a pre-recorded episode, we are going to dive into some of those questions. They might have come from YouTube. They might have been emailed in. They might have come from Spotify where you can leave comments. And I take those and we will answer them. Like Carol's question was, where does one find compatible players for a TTRPG game? They said specifically online, but let's broaden the question out. How does one vet players to know that their game styles are compatible, that they're playing D&D or whatever RPG for the same reasons, and to ensure that they'll commit? There's many games that folks try to start up and then players kind of drop off after the first couple of weeks because it can be a little bit of a commitment. Carol commenting that it's hard to justify the effort of prepping a game or creating characters or creating character connections if players are just going to kind of jump off in the first few sessions. Mm-hmm. All of these very good questions, and I present it to our panel today.
This is a tough one because even people who've been playing for years or people who have a wide net of players at their beck and call have trouble doing this. So one thing I will say is one way to ensure that the players you have with you are compatible is if you pick them out by being the one who teaches them the game, because then that they cannot play, oh, this is nothing like Pathfinder, or this isn't like my other 3 home games. This is you telling them what the game is, and you can tailor the experience to be what you want it to be, and therefore what they want it to be through some slight tweaking. So that would be my very, very, very first piece of advice.
That's literally exactly what I was going to say. I said, Sorry. I would say make your players. It's so much more important if you're making a group of people that they be friends, that they be compatible with each other around a table or on a Discord server or whatever. They don't have to be lifelong homies or anything like that. But the more from scratch you can start, the more you're able to tailor that game to the individual, to like the group that you have, because you can kind of see everything. Their styles will grow together, and you won't have to figure out what to do with a theatrical role player on one end of the table and a min-maxer on the other. or somebody who loves crunchy combat and somebody else who loves, big drama and intrigue and things like that. I find that the healthiest games I've had are with the healthiest groups I've made. And you make that just by I would say finding some people that and preferably who all know each other. Like one of my best games ever came from a game night where I selected 4 people who expressed interest and who all knew each other from having played board games or whatever for every Wednesday for 2 months, and they knew each other and they felt each other out. And I could be like, okay, these people are compatible, and then you bring them together. So you don't have however many sessions into the game. You don't have somebody who turns out to be a weird person because you've already had a chance to just kind of get to know them as a person, not just as a player.
Or they're all the same type of weird person.
Right. That's even better, honestly. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with that completely because from a GM perspective, I like to run D&D in a way that feels a little bit different to many folks' assumptions about D&D. And maybe that's not a radical thing to say. Maybe that's true for a lot of people. But just, this might tie into a question later on about magic is players who have played before have many assumptions about how magic works in 5th edition from a lore perspective because of either how it's worked in other settings or how the rules kind of present it to work. So certain assumptions get made about like, oh, well, I just cast Speak with Dead. It's a 3rd level spell. Like, it's not a big deal. I just, anybody can cast this spell. Whereas if you're trying to build up this reputation of magic being dangerous and kind of having a forbidden sense to it, it's much easier to do with a group that's brand new. The slight tweak I'd throw on that as well too, and I've seen a lot of listings online, particularly Facebook, for folks who kind of come on and they're like, I'm putting together a committed D&D group and I want everyone to be committed and I'm going to have tryouts and I'm going to we're going to do some trial games for the first few weeks and then you might get invited back to do a full campaign if you're cool, blah, 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 which is fine and great and people are entitled to vet players. But just the attitude can kind of seem a little bit weirdly confrontational.
Yeah, like, do you like these people or are you just looking for people who play the way that you want them to play? Or do you actually want to hang out with these people for 3 hours a week? You know what I mean?
I think a slight tweak you could add to that is exactly what you just said, Shawn and Brooks, which is instead of coming in with like this tryouts vibe to it, offer to teach new people over the course of a couple of weeks, do a couple of groups of like learn to plays, one-shots. And then if you want to, pick among those players who you thought you liked the most or were the most compatible with and invite them and see if they want to do a campaign.
Yeah, play tabletop as a game night. Do one-shots. Play, just like little, very hyper-focused Honey Heist, Lasers and Feelings, games with like 3 rules. You know what I mean? Or like everyone is John. And have a couple of nights of that and see who really takes to it. Dael, you have a thing.
Also, well, I was just going to say, actually playing games like that is often a good window into what type of a player a person is going to be, because if they're unwilling to let's just play this goofy fun game for a session, then that's probably going to tell you everything that you need to know about that player. You know what I mean? Because it can be tough. There are a lot of people who I have not that much to add to this. I feel like all the answers have been correct and I have not that much insight because I'm a chronic play with my friends person.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people who feel like they do not have anyone around them who will play D&D with them. And the looking for group online sort of existence of D&D or TTRPG play is a huge one that I just am not in. But for those people, there's kind of, I agree that vetting people is good and fine and you should do it. But also you do kind of have to lower your standards a little bit if you're going to be picking a bunch of strangers who already played and know the rules to play with just because they're coming in with prekids. It's like finding a roommate. That's what it's like.
Yeah.
Because they come from their upbringing and style of living in a house, and you come from yours, and you're just going to have to kind of compromise to find where it lands. You're not going to find your magic perfect group. And that doesn't mean that you have to put up with a bunch of crap, but really set your expectations at we're going to have a fun time. And whether that means we're not doing a huge serious campaign, we're just seeing what happens. And if someone misses a session, they miss a session, and we're just going to play it that their character just was a walking mannequin that episode. You know what I mean? Like, it's probably not going to be the perfect magical story. And maybe after playing this way with strangers online for a while, you will find your people, you will find your perfect group, and then you can do your story-driven campaign. But really try to keep your brain in the place of, this is a game that is for fun.
It's a game. It's a game. And I think that if you have people over in the context of having them over in the same way that you have them over for a game night, we're going to play Clue or Cluedo for international people.
Thank you so much for
You're
recognizing us.
The recognition doesn't go back the other way often enough.
You wouldn't believe that there is an entire rest of the world besides the United States. Sometimes I really
lies.
It's
Lies.
alleged, but I mean, I feel bad for New Zealand getting left off every map. My point here is have it be a fun time, and you start with like, maybe board games and see who's consistent and who likes to show up and likes to hang out and likes the vibe.
Has a good attitude.
Yeah. I'm like, if you can't get through Cluedo, if you're like, if your character gets accused of murder and like you're miserable and sulky about it and you leave 15 minutes before everyone else, I'm like, okay, bye. Thanks for playing. But like, it's people who are like, you're a dope person. You're interesting to hang out with. You gel well with everybody else. When you're putting together a game of D&D, you're not putting together a game. You're putting together a group, and like you're putting together a team that needs to work together. And you can't have everybody wanting to tell their own story. They have to tell everyone's story. You know what I mean? Together, they have to tell the story. And I think that having different opportunities to play little games, lower investment games, lower learning games, where it's more about creating that sense of community and friendship.
And I'm going to get real Machiavellian now. Ready?
Get in.
Ooh.
I think Wizards did a survey a while back about the length of a typical campaign, and the average campaign ran only about 3 weeks.
Are you serious?
Yes. People could, because they would start, they would get 1 or 2 sessions in, and then it would just fall apart. And
that sounds so real.
It does. It is so real. And so what my suggestion would be is to get a commitment for a group for 4 weeks, and then have some sort of buy-in. Have some sort of, hey, let's all chip in $20 and we'll set up 4 different dinners. 1 week we'll play here. However you need to get that buy-in for 4 weeks. If you can get past that 3rd week and everyone's still showing up, you've done better than most.
You're
groups.
in. Mm-hmm.
So find whatever that buy-in might be, set up that ahead of schedule, and see what you can do.
If you're a podcast, you can get more than 40 listeners. You're in the top 2% of all podcasts.
Man.
Have we made it there yet?
Yeah.
I know Mastering Dungeons has. I'm just asking about the Eldritch Lorecast.
Please tell your friends about the Eldritch Lorecast.
Yes.
Please.
This actually, you know what? Let me tell you. My Uncle Graham, when he was a young man, played the trumpet, and he needed some spare money, and so he started offering trumpet lessons. He's very good at the trumpet. He was very good, and he was very cheap. He had all these students who would ditch out on the lesson at the last minute, and they would leave him hanging, and they wouldn't, it was dreadful. It was awful. And so eventually he just said, you know what? That's it. It costs this much more money. You have to, if you don't let me know X amount of time before the lesson that you're not going to be there, the money's gone. And suddenly he got all these extra students, and they were way more respectful, and they all showed up all the time. Mm-hmm. So even though I'm not saying, hey, charge $50 per person to come and play in your game necessarily, but that idea of buy-in adds a little layer of respect. You know what I mean? You buy into the poker game because you don't want people sort of just faffing about at the table. So that sort of premise holds weight.
My paid games as a professional GM were definitely some of my most consistent campaigns that went on for sort of 2 years or so. I think as well, what I found with the D&D group that I have, and we've become really close friends, we've been playing together for about 6 years now. And it used to be like every week without fail. It was basically COVID that kind of stopped that from continuing on, and then lives have changed, but we're still going almost every single week, whether it's 1 or 2 of us playing. And I think going into it, we made jokes about like, oh, we got the Rolling Stones together on the first try, or we got the Beatles together on the first try. How lucky are we to have such a D&D group? But that's not quite actually how it happened. I put out an ad. I said on Facebook or whatever, I said, hey, I'm learning how to run D&D. I'd love to grab some other players. Any experience is fine. And we got, I think I had 5 or 6 players. One woman who had never played before, was kind of curious about the experience, came for one session, never saw her again. Then we had another guy who was there for a couple of weeks, and then he eventually had to go to like every second week because of a work commitment or something, and then he dropped off and disappeared. So then I put out another ad. I was like, oh, we've got some gaps in our group. And then we might have had some other people drop off. I can't quite remember. But we also had weeks where some people who are now in the regular group, weren't there for a while. And it got really shaky. And I think two things actually got the group to cement together. And that was, first of all, changing your mindset from D&D night being an event night, being like, we're gonna get together, like you arrange having a dinner party or something once a month or whatever. It's not an event night. It is part of your schedule, like joining a soccer team or whatever. It is right. Every Thursday without fail. And the person that's most important for is the game master, because fundamentally the game master is the only person who's vital for actually running the game, at least 5th edition speaking. And if you have one other player, I ran sessions for 2 players some weeks. I don't know if I ever got down quite to 1, but I definitely ran sessions for only 2 players, and I was there without fail every week. And that eventually got the buy-in from everybody who was dodging weeks because I've got a work commitment or I'm tired or whatever, which is fine. They're perfectly reasonable excuses. But then once the ball really got rolling, the people who wanted to stick around and wanted to see what happened week after week stuck around. And those that didn't, those that you're not getting the commitment from, didn't stick around. And that's fine. And if you end up with going from a group of 6 or a group of 4 down to a group of 2, if you're cool with that, that's fine. And if you're not, just advertise for more players. Be like, hey, we've got some holes in our group. We'd love to fill it. And if those people are committed, then, they'll stick around or not. I appreciate what Carol's saying in terms of like, it can take a lot of effort to prep when people keep dropping out. And that can be frustrating. But my advice is like, just run the game for 2 people. Like, don't throw that prep away. Just continue to run it. And then those that want to see where that story's going collectively will eventually, that group will hopefully calcify into something that is consistent.
Maybe we should stop using the word group. Maybe we should change it to team. I'm joining a D&D team. We had signups,
That. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. My team needs me. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I totally agree with, if you make it a priority, if people are like saying, oh, I can't go to dinner, I have D&D that night, that I think will get, like, when you make it just something that you are part of, or something that's kind of part of your schedule, something that's part of you, and then you just do it rain or shine. Mm-hmm. I think that and that also creates more of a feeling of kind of that kind of familialness. You know what I mean?
Yes. It also helps combat that thing of like trying to, like, whatever your consistency is, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or however it is, whatever your consistency is, try to set a date or a day that you play rather than trying to figure out every session individually, because that's how you get into that situation of, I can't do this date, I can't do that date, nobody can do a date, and it falls apart. But if you have that every Thursday or every second Thursday or the first Saturday of the month, every month, everybody knows to block that out in their schedule so that, if they get asked for a family dinner or something, unless it's genuinely something they can't get out of, they can say, Soz fam, can we do it on the Sunday instead? Because I got D&D that day or whatever.
I clocked you saying bi-weekly instead of fortnightly, Ben.
Oh, is that I didn't, okay. I apologize.
You saying Soz.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot Soz was us.
Oh, Soz us. Yeah. There you go. I learned spruiking was us. I didn't realize that wasn't a thing, but I think I already talked about that on the Lorecast. But
we have those in the States as well.
Spruiking?
Mm-hmm.
Really? I mean, I know you have it in the States. I just didn't think it was a word because it keeps coming up.
Well, we don't call them
red.
spruikers. We call them, I don't know,
barkers
or something like barkers. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Gethin is asking. Gethin emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com and asked when you're designing a dungeon or an adventure, how do you avoid writing adventures where a specific class or character archetype is necessary for the players to be able to proceed? For example, if you're playing Dragon Age Origins and you didn't like any of the rogue characters, so you didn't put any of the rogues in your party, and then by the time you had to fight the Archdemon at the end and he's a dragon, the only way to beat him is to fire ballistas at him, but you can't repair any of the ballistas because you don't have a rogue in your party. And none of
Your
them are high
first
enough level.
mistake was not playing a rogue in Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah, okay,
Your first
touche.
mistake was playing Dragon Age Origins, but
Ew.
go all the way back.
Whoa, there comes
I'm
the
right there
shade.
with you.
The actual examples that Gethin uses is, what if you have a trap and locked filled dungeon, but you don't have a rogue in the party who can pick locks? Or what if you have a narrative about feuding gods, expecting there to be a cleric or a paladin in the party and just nobody chooses that class? How do you write to avoid these kind of like niching the party in a way?
You kind of don't. Listen, hear me out on this. If you have feuding gods and no one's a cleric, is it going to be a bard who's just like, look, we're going to have a rap battle with Hades and we're going to make it work out. Okay. Like this is going to be fine. If you have a bunch of traps, I guess the wizard's going to have to figure out some new spells or develop new abilities. But I think it's on the DM to accept unorthodox solutions to the problems that they present.
Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. Because I think that's where, for me, a lot of D&D or TTRPGs shine. There's this brilliant story about the Critical Role campaign before it was a show, and this was in the phase where they were playing in Pathfinder, and or possibly even before then when they were playing 4E. Like it was really early
That's
days.
The deep lore. I didn't
It's
realize
the deep lore. Yeah,
wow,
they played
okay.
a one shot that was 4th edition, and then transitioned to Pathfinder for the home game. And then when 5e came out, they transitioned to 5e for the show. So there's your deep lore.
Yeah.
But Taliesin Jaffe's character that he brought was like an ice dragonborn, and so there's this story about him solving like a trap because they didn't, I guess, I don't know, the rogue wasn't there or something that day. And he used his ice breath to like freeze this component of the trap and then shatter it so that it wouldn't like go off the way that it would have otherwise, right? I don't remember how the trap worked, but that's how it functioned. And Travis talked about that as being the first time that he realized that D&D was like, oh, you can do whatever. It's not here as a trap, so you have to use your trap fixing kit in order to bypass it. It's just, these are the tools you have available. This is the problem that is in front of you. How do you approach it?
That's role-playing games. That's literally
that is role-playing games. That is what makes this different from video games, and it is so delightful. If you've got feuding gods and no cleric, then that's a point of drama.
That sounds like a dope campaign.
None of the people who are dealing with this are equipped to deal with this. They don't know the history of the gods. They don't understand. They can't communicate with the gods on this religious level that the gods are used to using. That's brilliant. That's great. If your barbarian wants to smash the lock, let him.
Let me tell you about the Horde, the group of half brother, half orc barbarians who are the gaming party. That's it. And if they come up to a lock, they play a game called Brothering Ram, where the low roll becomes the battering ram. They rage, and the rest of the brothers grab them and run them into the door until it breaks. If they had had a rogue in the party, that would have never happened. There's a trap. We play a game called Push 'em Down the Stairs. They used to play this as kids, where the weakest one got pushed down the stairs, i.e. through wherever the trap would be, and they clear the trap. That's role playing, as we're saying, right? That is the beauty of a game where we don't want one particular thing to work every single time.
Right.
We want there to be tension. We want there to be drama. And sadly, 5th edition kind of fixed that problem for us. The problem that wasn't a problem. Because now, in 2024, how do you pick a lock? All you need are thieves' tools. You don't need to be proficient with them. And you roll a dexterity sleight of hand check. So if you have dexterity sleight of hand trained or proficient, and you have along the way purchased a set of thieves' tools, you don't need a rogue. You don't need to be proficient with those tools. If you are proficient with those tools, you have advantage on the check, but you don't need it. Who is better at knowing religion than a cleric in 5th edition? Anybody that's intelligence-based. Because at least in the 2014 version, it was generally an intelligence check for religion, which clerics were generally not high with. So sages, wizards, any other class generally knew more about religion than clerics did. And anybody could be trained in religion based on your background, based on some other choices you might make. So the game itself treated it as a problem and then fixed the problem where there wasn't really a problem to begin with.
I mean, if anything, like one of my favorite things is lopsided parties when I'm DMing. Like if we have, if I have like a wizard and a rogue and a bard and like they get into a bar fight, I'm like, well, let's see what you gotta let them figure it out. Gethin, brother, because I did look up that Gethin is usually a male name from Wales. Just throw it at them, man. Just see what happens. They'll figure it out. Just let them. But the trick is you have to be able to accept their solution and not the one in the book. That's the other thing. Like I remember I had a thing in college where my DM was looking for one of us to cast the spell guidance on a lock. And we tried everything. Oh my God, we tried so many things. And then eventually he goes, well, there is a spell called guidance. And we're all like, oh, but I'm like, one of those everythings could work. And I think that's a little bit more interesting.
I agree completely. I think this conversation kind of wraps with a bit of advice that we've talked about before, which is for GMs and adventure writers, don't hard gate the vital path. The way that I write the Monster Hunter style adventures or the Monster Hunt style adventures is that they will fight the monster at the end, but how much they want to engage with the adventure and the encounters and different things and challenges will just change how easy or difficult that fight is at the end. So trying not to like put a locked door with a high DC check and it's made of iron, so really hard to batter down. You're going to have to go through a couple of the Orc brothers before you get through it. Don't make that the vital path necessarily. So there's just a little bit of that advice kind of tempering the conversation a little bit. But I otherwise completely agree. And I've been in groups before where it can be frustrating where the GM has one solution in mind and until the party figure out to say the exact words the GM wants to hear, you're just kind of stuck throwing your hands up in the air. From an adventure author point of view, I don't think you need, because you can't possibly author every possible solution to a problem. That's kind of a GM, the adventure author is the script writer, is the playwright, and the GM is the director, and at some point the director needs to take over and kind of realize the vision of what's in the script. So as an adventure author, don't worry about trying to provide multiple solutions to every single challenge that's in there. Maybe you have a couple, if they go this way, this happens. If they go that way, that happens, but not every single one. I kind of slam those points out because I have a kind of a similar but separate question that I've grappled with, not just as a designer, but also a GM, particularly as a GM. Do you put loot in your dungeons that is specific to your party, or do you put loot in your dungeons that would make sense as to why it is in that dungeon, whether or not it will be useful to anybody in the party or not?
The latter.
I definitely used to do the first of those. And then at some point, I think I reached somewhere in the middle. I prefer for it to make sense for the dungeon. But if I can find a way to have that thing that makes sense for the dungeon also be a thing that the player wanted, that works for me.
Okay.
I'm not above catering to the party a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I often did the latter as well. In fact, almost always did the latter. And it often ended up with like fun kind of like unexpected characters going, oh, I want that. I don't think I invented this magic item. I think it's in the DMG, but I kind of tinker with things so I can never remember what comes from where. But it's like a diadem of light. And the idea was that it was like an elven queen's tiara or something that you wear on your head, and it creates like light in front of it, almost like a Galadriel-esque, like, the beacon of hope. And it just became, I was like, this doesn't really seem to fit anybody's character in the party. I just didn't think about the utility of it. And the half-orc barbarian just like kind of used it as a miner's light, just like turn it on to like, go ahead of the party and make sure there's no risks ahead. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's really cute.
So it does end up with like fun fun kind of combinations that you didn't necessarily expect.
Right. That's true. Actually, it's worth noting. I definitely steer away now from making an item being like, this is going to be for this person, because often a player you didn't expect to grab it grabs it, and then it becomes a little bit weird, and you feel like, hey, wait, but my plans. Whereas if I will make an item and be like, yeah, this is basically a gravity hammer from Halo that I'm sure my barbarian player will enjoy. But if the fighter takes it or something, I'm not going to be sad about it. Or I try to make items that I'm like, hey, I've noticed that this gnome character, the player is really frustrated that they can't move very far. I'm going to give them something that allows them to teleport. But because it is something that you think is useful for that player, but is not tied to that character, it becomes, a little bit more freeform.
Can we agree that magic items are trash?
Say more about that.
Oh my God.
So with 5th edition especially, the players have all these options already. Their class, their species, their feats. They've got a virtual panoply of things they can do. So you give them a magic item. That magic item now I'm not talking about story-wise. We can do things with story and magic items, but let's just talk about them as tools. These magic items either increase their power of the things they can already do, and they love that because we add the +1 or we add the +2, or they can do something better than what they can already do. So I'm not going to do my action to take these 3 attacks because now I have the axe of holy crap, I just smacked something. And I'm going to use that because it's better than my other thing that I can do, which all that does is add a level of power to the game that the game doesn't really need or want. So you either are making the characters more powerful, you're giving them something more powerful, or you're giving them something less powerful, which then they're like, I don't need it. I can already do these other things. It may work on the off chance that I need this thing that shoots a beam of radiant light, but I'll probably forget I even have it when I need a beam of radiant light, unless I just happen to look at my character sheet and go, oh my God, I've got the Helm of Radiant Light. Oh, cool. Here we go. I understand the importance of magic items in the game to be a reward, to be a story-focused thing, but just in terms of mechanics, they are a detriment to the game, and I will die on that hill.
I kind of love that take.
Thank you.
I'm not even sure if I agree, and I love it.
I definitely disagree, but I love it because it's so rare that I disagree with Shawn. I mean, I completely see where you're coming from mechanics-wise, but have you considered, Shawn, magic items cool, though?
No, we've got the thumbnail for this week's episode, which is just Shawn, looking real mad with a bunch of magic items on the screen.
Eyes on fire.
Yeah, exactly. Shawn just lasering.
And obviously, I am being a little bit over the top there, but I'm not.
No, you heard it here first. Dante, get the bleep ready. But I'm feeling like this episode title is Shawn says magic items and other stories.
Yeah, there you go. I think I agree with you, Shawn. I think the thing, I give magic items out so rarely that my players kind of have noted that, but I think that's a betterment for my campaign, not just in terms of capturing a dark fantasy feel, but I also agree with you that, I was making a character the other week. I think I was making them for the actual play that we did with Kelly, Jay, and Latia that's on the Ghostfire main channel. And I was just like, they get so much stuff, there's so many things here. And this was actually why I suggested to you, Shawn, little peek behind the curtain about curbing back how many heritage trait features we're giving people in the new Grimhollow books, is because I was like, maybe they don't need so much stuff, and maybe we actually pull that back a little bit in the heritage thing to make those features feel more unique and special for what they are in their little individual bits, rather than and you get this, and you get this, and you get this. I think from a storytelling perspective, magic items are really valuable. I really like consumable magic items. Or magic items that require the players to kind of do a little bit of crafting or something. I had spell scrolls that were engraved onto the wall inside a chapel. They were like prayers. And so to be able to actually take and cast those spells, they had to be transcribed onto a scroll first. And so there was a little bit of extra kind of storytelling and tinkering there. I think that they're also, and I know that you know this, it's more so for people who might not have thought of this listening, and for Dael's sake, that
I love where this episode's going.
Shots
I can't say I don't deserve it, but also
no, I'm going to get flamed for that.
Dael out here
I'm
catching
bringing it down
strays,
upon
man.
myself.
Jeez.
Is this idea that it's like advancement between levels, especially if your characters don't level up very often, it still gives players a sense of progression, a sense of getting something new and unlocking something new between their levels. But I also think part of the reason that makes them so trash, and I'm actually just kind of word vomiting, but I was thinking about this because somebody sent in an email about, and I apologize to this person because I can't remember their name, but about like, does bound accuracy help or harm the fantasy of D&D? And I don't know about that question specifically, but I think what bound accuracy definitely does is make progression in D&D far less meaningful after a certain point. Once you're level 8 with a +2 weapon and you've got like a +12 to hit, like the monster has to have AC 20 something for that to ever really matter.
Sure.
Whether you're going to hit or not. And I know Colville's done videos on about like the fun is hitting, not being told you miss. But you're multi-attacking by that point, and now there's weapon masteries that kind of go into that. I feel like there's so much in there we could maybe step away from the bound accuracy a little bit just to keep the challenge curve, you know, in the game at least a little bit. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I went on a bit of a spiel.
I mean, 5e definitely doesn't seem to want you to be handing out magic items constantly. And I think it actually plays best when you're not. And I think part of my love for magic items is in their rarity. And I'm also, you know, I think there's so many layers to why I'm like, it's fine, do whatever. And, you know, another element is that I'm a DM who I'm like, yeah, but I control the world. So if they get too powerful, I'll just make the monsters too powerful, you know? But in terms of balance, it is a nightmare. But if I think about like the coolest experiences I've had with magic items and finding or receiving magic items as a player, you know, it kind of ties into what Ben was saying as well. There was, you know, I think about Dusk, where my character at some point ended up with a ruby arm that was a robot that I could just ask information about the world. And the GM, at his own discretion, could decide whether the ruby arm knew it or not, because the implication was there were 2 fingers missing from the arm when I got it. And the implication was they're out there somewhere and the arm is incomplete without them. So if you want this to access all the information, you got to go questing and get those other things, you know? So there's, you know, it's got a little bit of a control valve already built in there. There's, you have to commit to like wanting the thing. But I was obsessed with that magic item. And there were moments where I forgot that it wasn't like a real robot hand. And I tried to ask it questions when Matt was not at the table. But yeah, you know, and we got other magic items in that campaign. I don't remember what they were. That's the only one that I remember getting, you know?
Was that a 4th edition campaign?
Yeah.
Different. 4th edition.
It's a different
Totally different. 4th edition, the math of 4th edition made it integral that you did get magic items.
That's true. But the other thing about it is that as a magic item, and as a magic item, it also broadly, like mechanically, it just acted as an implement, right? It was just like a plus whatever implement.
Right.
But narratively, it had this other element to it that was beyond the mechanics of the game. But yeah, you are right. As a system, 4E was way more, give them the magic items, give them the stuff. I don't remember what the other ones I got were. They were there, but I don't remember them.
All right. I'm gonna stop. I want to hear what Brooks has to say.
Either have them be very rare and have them be very powerful, or have them be everywhere to the point that vendors just are like people have them and it's no big deal, or you can have a quill that you can dictate to, or you can have but think of I like mundane magical items, which is to say just like oh, a bag that makes groceries lighter, or like something like that. Like magic is everywhere, like suffused with everything. And I'll throw in little like Ioun stones, like candy. I like Ioun stones because they don't take up a slot. And you just like throw them on there. Yeah, it's like, and you get little sparklies and little orbital little moons around your head. That's cool. Collect them all. And I like ones that, and like the more obscure or nichey the effect, the better. I think that if you have a sword of giant slaying, that's one thing. But if the sword only especially works on giants that have a particular letter in their name, I think that's even more interesting. Because before you fight, you go, yeah, well, what's your name though? Okay, get the sword. So like, so I think that
is that a silent cue?
Yeah. Come from father's side. So like I think that it'd be really cool if you're going to be throwing magic items in, it's like, one, I want my accomplishments and achievements to be crowned with something more than just like a cool shield that lights on fire. Like I'm going to forget that it lights on fire most of the time, or it's just going to be another thing that I say when I start battle. Like, all right, I ignite my shield and then blah. And I'm like, if there's no wow factor there, if you're not excited like a kid on Christmas to light that shield up, you don't like that. It's like, why do you have it? I think a magic item should have that sense of reverie about it, or it should feel like nothing because it's nothing. And I've had campaigns of both where magic items were very, very rare and they got it and it was a treasure. It was a relic. Or you get it and it's just like, oh yeah, this bowl always serves, or mug serves whatever's in it at the proper temperature. Like it's just instantly drinkable tea. It's great.
Okay. Right. So one of my favorite inspirations for magic items is a show called The Lost Room. It only got one season. It had the less famous Fanning sister in it. But it was just, the idea was that there was this weird event that happened in a hotel room in like the 70s or something. And every item from that room, once removed from that room, just became kind of like a magic thing. But they do weird stuff. Like there's a nail file that makes people forget that they talked to you. Or there's a comb that when you brush it through your hair, it makes time stop for like 5 seconds. Or there's a wristwatch that when you put an egg in the center of the wristwatch, it boils the egg. Like they do bizarre, weird little things.
I love
Oh, it's so good. There's a pencil. If you tap the pencil, it makes a penny, right? And people have gone mad tapping the pencil trying to get rich. It's really specific little things, but it all builds up into like there's a cult trying to collect all the items and it becomes like a really big story around these little items. And I just find so much inspiration in that. And one of my favorite items I've ever had in one of my games was a coin that when you flip it always lands on heads. Like that is this magic thing, and give that to your players and you'll be surprised the kind of chaos they can come up with, because it's not a combat item, but they can use it. And
now you're Two-Face. And like Ben, can I tell the good people one little soup son of information about the book, or should I keep it really quiet?
No, go for it.
There's a shirt that was offered by Favelis called the Slim Fit shirt. And the way the Slim Fit shirt works is if you activate it, you become flat. Do you have Flat Stanley over there? You become 2-dimensional, and you can like shimmy between like a door jamb or a crack in a window.
That's amazing.
Right. And that's the whole, and that's the only thing it does. And I'm like, I don't know, but you can get upended by a gust of wind. So like, it's a little bit monkey paw, you know what I mean? And like, I like that. And I want it to be magical, but its magical thing to be kind of like it's like, oh great, what do I do with this? But then you'll find the one time where you could use it, you'll be like, your rogue will like do a backflip because they'll be so excited that they get to like finally go and like sneak through a little, I don't know, under a refrigerator or something like that. I just think that's so cool.
Yeah.
But that's what I want. Like, it's not like a +1 to anything. It's just like, just random, like you need a sentence to describe what it does and there's no numbers in the sentence. I think that's cool.
I do love a magic item that becomes kind of like, not really a character in the campaign, but just becomes like a recurring prop. It's almost like R2-D2 or C3, like a droid, a robot. In the Obi-Wan series, the little robot that Leia has and kind of flies around that they wanted to turn into a toy. Because I've had a couple like that, like the diadem, got used constantly. I had a magic item called the Skipping Stone, which allowed you to teleport just a very small distance if you threw it and then jumped to it. and that just got constant use throughout the game because you didn't have to attune to it, so they'd pass it between each other constantly.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like the slim fit shirt would be one of those things. The cloak of the bat was something that got heaps of use by one of the characters in my campaign, and I feel like the slim fit shirt would be a similar thing. It reminds me of was it A Link to the Past, the Zelda game on
with the Minish Cap that you could
3DS?
you could shrink?
No.
Inspiration was Paper Mario, but go on.
It was basically, instead of becoming super thin, you became like a mural on the wall. You just like stuck yourself to the wall, and so then you could like go like behind doors or through gaps or something that was so thin because you were just part of the wall, and then you'd pop off of the wall whenever you wanted to. And I feel like that's such a cool way to design as a GM traps or not traps so much as like puzzles or obstacles or things that players could get through using that magic item, but then also see how they use it creatively to get through areas that you wouldn't expect them to. Yeah, I don't know. I just love magic items that have like a pop, a personality to them, even if they don't literally have a personality to them. You know what I mean?
Stop giving people statistics. Stop giving people numbers and like spells. Stop giving people stuff that's already written down in the book and just have them do random shit.
Yeah.
There's like I'll just plug the Deep Reach culottes, also findable in Favelli's little section there. That's one of my favorite items that I've ever designed, but you'll have to get them.
I think by the end I did agree with Shawn. I'm a little mad about it.
Yeah, you've changed my mind.
Well,
this feels like Subway takes all of a sudden.
I feel like in the end we all agree with Shawn.
I don't.
And that's why this is the number 3 podcast in all the realms, second to number 2. All right. Speaking of magic items, this podcast has taken up one of your 1 hour slots for the week for magic items. So you're going to have to wait till next week until it recharges at dawn on Wednesday, roughly. Thumbs, stars, likes, comments. You can comment on Spotify. All those things help us get out to more listeners. Brooks, thank you so much for giving your time, joining us. It's been an absolute delight. What are some, apart from Enchanting Emporiums, which we've touched on a few times, what do you want people to check out?
What do I want people to check out? I have been absolutely enchanted lately by something called it's a game system called the Wild Sea. Fantastic. Trees have drunk the oceans. The entire world is covered in trees. And now you ply the green tree sea on chainsaw hulled boats. And their magic system, if you want to call it that, is fantastic. You can play as a cactus or a moth or a bag of spiders. You know, they're clad. It's like Blades in the Dark on like 2 tabs of acid, and it's fantastic. And it's really great. The way that it's structured is really great for people. To go back to Carol, really great for people who don't really get into the techie side of it. Not super crunchy. It's just so, I would definitely say it is a fun game play experience. So check that out. I don't know. I was one of the earlier I got on the Kickstarter and I'm loving it. So
nice.
Very active Discord community. And thank you for having me. It's been genuinely a privilege to be here and get to meet all you cool people and hang out with you guys.
Awesome. You can catch us next week, same time, same place, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time online, or it's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, Australian Eastern Time. We'll be back next week. My name's Ben Byrne. I've been here with Brooks Donoghue, Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin. We'll be back next week for another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
Eldritch Lorecast. I tried something new, okay? I don't need a judgment.
I liked it. I thought it was great. Yeah.
Thank you, Brooks.
I'm here for you, man.
Alrighty.
Yay. Big ups, y'all.
Thank
that
you.
was great.
Yeah, thanks for making the time.
Thanks. Appreciate
It's awesome.
that.
Good
It's
to
very
reconnect.
nice to have you join us.